Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, having a conversation with Dr. Ross McKitrick, Professor of Economics, University of Guelph. Ross, we're talking about this analysis of the economic costs associated with emission reduction targets. What does, given your conclusions and the assessments that you've made, what does real leadership on this file, what does that look like exactly?
I think it has to begin with a realistic assessment of what's possible. And unfortunately, the way climate policy has been made going back many decades, you get a whole bunch of world leaders together in a meeting and they all talk each other into a bit of a frenzy and they say, well, we'll commit to a 30% reduction target. And then they go home and they think, well, how do we get there? And they have to find out that, no, you can't actually do that. I would like to see a process where we start by saying, what's a realistic target? And I think economists like me would prefer that we just rely on a simple pricing instrument. Don't have all these other regulations. They're very inefficient. But what's a pricing target that we're willing to live with? And that will dictate what's feasible, what we can do. And that's actually been the prescription of economics going back many decades. It's don't pick a target and then say we're going to get there hell or high water. You start with what's a realistic price for these types of emissions, and then let the economy sort out how do we do this at the lowest possible cost, and also get the process of innovation underway so that over time the technology will improve, but you can't force that. It's not an instantaneous process. I should also add that carbon dioxide is totally different from sulfur and particulates and smog and all the other air pollution that we deal with. In those cases, there's technology available. There's catalytic converters on your tailpipes. There's scrubbers on smokestacks. The technology is known, so we can eliminate most of those types of air contaminants from urban air at a fairly low cost. Carbon dioxide is totally different. We don't have the technology to work that kind of miracle. And that's why this issue persists the way it does.
Have you turned your mind to nuclear at all as part of the solution?
Yes, and there's a lot of discussion around nuclear. I think that's an area where, if we were talking about back in the 70s and 80s, they turned out to be extremely expensive to build. We built them nevertheless. We have working nuclear plants. At this point, people that I speak to say they're still very expensive to build. It's a very slow process to build a nuclear plant. But that's where I think there's a lot of promise for the innovation to bring those costs down, and also the timeline, so that Ontario's hoping to double the capacity of the Bruce nuclear plant. And that's an area where I think, okay, that's worth looking at closely and putting a lot of effort into what's now available that wasn't available 30 years ago on the nuclear side.
And small modular reactors and mini reactors as well as part of the solution?
Right. Now, I will say, though, with nuclear, it's a baseload power source. You can't manage your daily fluctuations, the peaking hours. You're always going to need some gas plants running in a province like Ontario, unless you want to risk blackouts on a hot summer day because the power demand suddenly surged.
Yeah, people don't realize that's part of the issue is the peak demand at certain times of the year, for sure.
Exactly.
Love to get your sense. Do you think the opposition, Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives, are they starting to go in the right direction? We hear a lot about axe the tax. I'm not sure what else you've uncovered about their plans.
Well, they do seem to, well, they're focused on axe the tax, of course, but I think they've also come to terms with the fact that the regulatory agenda is even worse. So they haven't really been explicit about what exactly their plans would be, but they have pointed out things like the EV mandate is a bad idea for Canada. It remains to be seen, I think, whether we're going to see the kind of leadership that I was talking about, which is let's decide what's feasible and then pursue that, or are they just going to start with more pie in the sky targets and no hope of achieving them?
Well, we won't leave it 4 years before we have you back. Clearly, there's a lot going on here, a lot to discuss. I want to thank you for adding your insights on these very important topics.
My pleasure, Tony.